Hello, everyone. Welcome back for this month's nutrition presentation where we're going to talk about how to survive today's food jungle. My name is Kristy Grayson, and I am the health coach here at our Monument Natural Grocers location. And I'm really excited to be here with you to share this information with you. I think nutrition information is really important to have in our hands so that we can make what we feel are the best decisions for our family's health and well-being. So we're going to go ahead and get started. But before we begin, please remember that this is not intended to diagnose, treat, or mitigate any disease. Dietary supplements and foods can interact with prescription medications. So if you're taking a prescription medication, please become informed about the possible interactions. For those of you who are familiar with our company and those of you who are new, you will remember that we're a family-owned business and operated business, and we are based on these 5 founding principles even today. The one that I'm going to focus on today is having everyday affordable pricing. As a company, we believe that healthy, quality food and products should be available for everyone, no matter what, at an affordable price. And that is one foundation that we definitely work hard to meet. So today we're going to talk about 10 survival tips to help us survive the food jungle that is going on, that has been going on for a while. But before we begin, we really want to focus on learning how to listen to our body. Because sometimes we don't realize the foods we eat are actually not good for our body. And so we need to know what some of those signs and symptoms might be. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize that it doesn't always have to manifest in digestive concerns. Those are probably some of the most common that people come and talk about, but it doesn't have to be that. So the ones we're going to focus on just briefly here are digestive complaints, pain and inflammation, mood issues, unbalanced energy, physical appearance complaints, weight issues, and even things centered around menstrual cycles. So let me give you a couple examples of each of these. So digestive complaints can be anything like heartburn, gas, bloating, cramping, diarrhea, constipation, etc. Some examples for pain and inflammation can center around headaches, joint pain, and allergies. Mood issues can include irritability and even feeling depressed. Now, unbalanced energy could be either too little or too much. Now, I know many of you are probably thinking like me, like too much energy? I don't think so. But for those of you who do get really ramped up and it's very hard for you to kind of come back down, that would also be an unbalanced energy situation. Sleep disturbances could also be in that one as well. Physical appearance complaints are going to center around skin health. Could even be bags or dark circles under the eyes. Of course, we know that that can also have to do with little to no sleep too. Weight issues might be too little or too much. And then foods can even impact our menstrual cycles as women, so it can cause PMS, cramping, bloating, and even fatigue. So it's important to remember that no two people are the same. You want to customize your eating habits, diet, lifestyle habits around what's best for your body. And that's why it's important for us to learn how to listen to what our body's trying to tell us. It's also important to remember that different life circumstances and different seasons, and what I mean by that are like age or pregnancy or as a child or an older adult or someone who's an extreme athlete who's training a lot, those are going to require different nutrients at different times. So your diet doesn't necessarily need to be the same for here on and ever. You might need to make some adjustments. So that's just something to consider. And we want to also remember that even though we want to make some adjustments, there are still some things that all of us should minimize and potentially really eliminate from our diets. So first up, survival tip number 1, we want to focus on eating real food. Our food has changed drastically more in the last 50 years than it has in the past. So what is real food? What do we want to focus on? We want to focus on foods that are as close to how they appear in nature as possible. Now we're really, especially our younger generations, are used to going to the grocery store to grab their foods that they're not used to necessarily seeing a garden or seeing some of these foods that are grown in the dirt, or they come from a certain plant or a certain tree. But it's really important that we kind of get back to that mentality of how is it found in nature, and that's how we want to eat it, as close to nature as possible. We want to choose foods, and this should say without chemicals in them. So chemicals that would be in them, we want to think artificial colors, artificial flavors, artificial sweeteners. We want to stay away from these things. We want to eat foods that you can imagine in their raw state or growing in nature. And a very extreme example of this would be a Twinkie, right? Can we imagine the raw materials that go into making a Twinkie, and can we imagine them being somewhere in nature? Probably not. So that's something to consider. One really good note is if it came from a plant or a tree, eat it. If it was made in a plant, don't eat it, okay? So that's a good rule of thumb. And back to the Twinkie and other items, we want to watch out for food with an exceptionally long shelf life. Imagine cleaning out your car from however many months, and you find that French fry from that really fast food meal that you ate months ago, and it still looks in perfect condition, right? So we really want to be mindful of eating foods that have a really long shelf life, because let me tell you, there's a reason they have a long shelf life. So it's only been within about the last 200 years that we've been eating refined foods that have been processed. So things like sugar, canned foods, refined white flour, and it's only been since the 50s that margarine and other refined fats, which can be really damaging to health, have been on our table. So we want to consider, how much has this food been processed? We want to focus our grocery store shopping, if you will, around the perimeter of the grocery store, where we're going to hit produce, and then we're going to hit dairy and meats, and even the frozen section. And by doing this, it's going to decrease our need for food labels, even though food labels are very important. However, what I'm saying is, if we're picking up an apple from the produce section, as long as we have a non-GMO apple, which we'll talk about in a second, then we don't necessarily need a food label, because we know it came from nature. Versus when we buy and maybe an applesauce off of the shelf, we really need to be able to read the food label to see what else in addition to the apple is actually in there. So that brings us to survival tip number 2, which is reading food labels. I can't tell you how important this is. And with my coaching customers, I usually say, you're either going to love me or hate me about this. And that is because once you start reading them, you really can't not read them, because you're going to be more mindful of what's in it, and what you're buying, okay, and what you're putting in your body. And the more you become connected to this, probably the closer on the perimeter of the grocery store you're going to shop. And so what we want to do is we want to start by avoiding laundry list labels. And what is that? That is labels that have lists of tons and tons and tons of ingredients, that most of which we can't even pronounce. So if it has any more than 5 to 10 ingredients in it, it's probably junk food, and you really want to consider maybe moving on to something different, or making something homemade if you can, like say if it's a bread or a muffin, etc. The other piece we have to pay attention to is the serving size. A lot of times we eat in one sitting more than the serving size, but we're getting our information from the nutrition label. But if we're not paying attention to that serving size, like let's say a cookie, and it says 4 grams of sugar, oh great, that's great in a cookie. But if we've then eaten 3 cookies and it says the serving size is only 1, then we now have to multiply that sugar amount by 3. So definitely want to pay attention to that because they're usually a lot smaller serving sizes than what you think that you would eat in one sitting. And last, if you can't pronounce an ingredient, it's a really good idea to avoid it. Now, there is an exception here with vitamins and minerals, but I would even encourage maybe reconsidering that as well. And what we mean by this is sometimes they will add extra vitamins and minerals, but this could also be because the item was, like, let's say flour is processed so highly that they have to add the vitamins back in. But these are going to be weird words that are actually like maybe B vitamins, and they're going to be in their more kind of scientific name, if you will, like riboflavin or thiamine, etc. So that might be one small exception. The other thing is I encourage people to know what are names for sweeteners, especially your artificial sweeteners. We really want to stay away from those. Those guys are no good for our health. So you really want to be cautious of those guys. And I will tell you, there's all kinds of names out there for sweeteners. So we want to be cautious. In addition of that, we want to be cautious of loopholes in what the company is required and not required to list on the label so that you are fully aware of what's in it. Trans fats are an example of this. So for instance, if a product has less than 0.5 grams of trans fat per serving, they do not have to list that trans fat. Now, what they do have to do is they have to list a partially hydrogenated oil. Those guys are bad news as well. So if you see that listed in extra ingredients, which is really extra, or other ingredients, you really want to make sure that you learn those areas of the nutrition fact label. So survival tip number 3 is, if at all possible, you really want to opt for organic and non-GMO foods. The growing consensus among scientists is that small doses of pesticides and other chemicals can cause lasting damage to human health, especially during fetal development and early childhood. Scientists now know enough about the long-term consequences of ingesting these powerful chemicals to advise that we minimize our consumption of pesticides. Now, this is a quote from the Environmental Working Group, and these guys are probably an organization you want to jot down. They have a lot of great resources on their website. They even have a phone app that you can download. I'm sure many of you have heard of Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. They'll have lists of like that on their website, even beyond the Dirty Dozen. These guys are just a great resource, not only for produce, but they're a great resource for cleaning products, if I can say that, body care products, anything that we put in our house or our home, sunscreens coming up with the summer. So they'll rate products based on how clean they are, and then they usually try to put more of a detail on the rating system so you understand what you're getting. So definitely check those guys out. They're worth having as a resource. Now, genetically modified organisms, or more commonly known as GMOs, are an unknown factor in health. And what we mean by that is we don't know a lot about the impact of consuming GMOs on our health. There is some information coming out, but this is still kind of a relatively newish topic. So you really want to minimize that. Think made in the lab. That's what I would think. Some of the top crops are soybeans, corn, and canola. These are also the most common products that you're going to see in processed boxed foods. So I really highly recommend you take a look at this on your labels. And there's lots of kind of labeling wars, I guess, where people are trying to request that they want more information on our packages so that we know what we're getting. So sometimes you'll see products that will say contains bioengineered ingredients. I would stay away from those guys. A few extra crop additions to add to that would be squash, papaya, Arctic apples, aqua bounty salmon, and something called the innate potato. Now, a little bit I can give you on the potato and the apple is that these guys were genetically modified so that they don't brown. And I believe the potatoes are actually being used in some fast food, I think. So definitely worth doing some research on that. The two labels that you'll see here on the right side of the screen are the certified labels that you will find on packages that will be labeled USDA organic or non-GMO project verified. So important to learn our labels in addition to reading our nutrition labels. Survival tip number 4 is that we want to choose naturally raised animal products. Now, what I mean by that is when we think of a cow, we think of a cow in a field eating grass. And unfortunately, those that are being raised for meat are not always in that field eating grass. Sometimes they're in what we call CAFOs, and those are concentrated animal feeding operations. They are literally jammed in to these small areas with dirt, not grass, and they're kind of jammed in there because they're such close quarters. There is no roaming on the field. There is no eating grass. Most of them are fed antibiotics because of close quarters to keep them from getting sick. And growth hormones. The growth hormones is to try to help them get larger faster so that they can be sold. And then they're being fed grains like corn and soy, which you will remember from the previous slide was most commonly GMO crops. If you don't do well with grains like corn and soy, and if we don't do well with GMOs, then that is going to be a problem because whatever our food is eating, we're eating. And that can all impact us, including the antibiotics and the hormones, etc. So very important to see how that animal has been raised. And one thing we are really picky about is the meat that we'll carry here. We only carry naturally raised meats. That means that these animals have had access to pasture. They were never fed animal byproducts or given growth promoters. And they were raised without antibiotics because there wasn't a need because they had space. They're getting fresh air. They're getting their normal diet, and they're able to practice their natural behaviors. And believe it or not, it actually creates a different nutrient profile for that animal product. You actually get more nutrients out of that product when they've been able to eat their natural diet and participate in their natural behavior. So that's something to consider as well. A little budget saving tip that you could consider if you like would be meatless Mondays. So maybe once a week, you utilize a different alternative protein source. Those generally are, some grains have some good protein and then some legumes. Focusing majorly on the veggies though. The only point I would make on this is some people don't digest these guys very well. So the legumes and the grains. And so you might want to be careful with how you prepare them and how much you're eating on those guys. Okay. Now, survival tip number 5 is going to be have a plan and prioritize. I mean, we know food costs are going up. We know that eating healthy can sometimes feel overwhelming and can sometimes be a huge adjustment to our schedule and our time because we have to do a lot more cooking and preparing. But remember it being an investment in your health, an investment in helping you feel well, have good energy, clear mental thoughts, supporting healthy blood sugar. There are so many benefits to cooking at home versus eating out. We don't have as much control when we eat out as to what kind of ingredients they're using, we don't most of the time don't even know what ingredients they're using, what kind of oils they're using. So these are all things to consider. And I don't know about you, but I've noticed it is getting more expensive to eat out too. So it could also be a little easier on the budget as well. So we want to make a meal plan because if we have a plan, then when we go into the store, we're less likely to get distracted by all of the other items in the store. And if we also have a plan, then we hopefully don't end up with a basket full of a single item here, a single item there, and not being able to put these items together to actually make a meal. So if you have a recipe with a few recipes for the week, then that's going to be really helpful for you to actually prepare those meals and only buy the ingredients that you need. Before you make that meal plan, utilize what you have in the house already. That's also another budget saving tip is if you already have the certain spices, you already have some chicken in the freezer or some beef in the freezer, then all you need to do is just search for a recipe centered around those ingredients that you already have in stock. If you can, preparing ahead of time is very helpful. And what I mean by that is many of us are working, we head home, and I don't know about you, but the last thing I want to do is cook. And usually that puts us eating really late. But if you can spend a day on the weekend doing some preparation for the week, maybe you make 2 or 3 meals on the weekend day so that you have them ready for the week. And then you come home, you just heat it up and you're ready to go. Or you freeze some and you use them for a time that you know you're not going to have as much time. So that's another little time-saving tip there. I also recommend people, like, if you're gonna get produce, some people get really upset if you get produce, you stick it in your drawer, you don't have a plan for it, you didn't prepare it, and then it goes to waste because it goes bad. But if you take that produce and you prepare it, wash it, cut it up, get it into containers, then you have a nice, quick, easy, healthy snack too, and you can add a little hummus in there. So a lot of times if when we're hungry, we go to the fridge and we want something now. We don't want to take time to prepare a snack or cut up the snack. But if we have them ready to go in the fridge, then we're less likely to eat things that we really don't need and more likely to eat those things that are really helpful for our health. Getting kids involved in meal preparation and even in helping you pick out certain veggies, like say for a salad, can also be really powerful and helpful. I know some people really struggle getting their kids to eat vegetables. There are certain ways that you can sneak vegetables into, say, soups, or even in baked goods, getting some zucchini ground up in there. There are some different ways that you can sneak it in. But the more you can kind of get them involved in helping and choosing, then hopefully you will win them over to start eating some really good vegetables. And last, we want to prioritize time for quality meals. And again, that kind of goes back to if we're prepared, we have a plan, and we have some things prepped, we're less likely to run by the drive-through and grab things that are not going to be really as satisfying and are not really going to have the nutrition that our body is going to need. Survival tip number 6 is to eat seasonally. And, I'm not really sure how much people realize this anymore. And how I would explain this too is because I grew up in Tennessee, which we have a lot longer growing season in Tennessee than we do here in Colorado. So we know geographically different areas have different growing seasons. So eating seasonally it's going to look a little different depending on where you're at. Now, today we all have access to grocery stores, and for instance, strawberries would be a great example. We can pretty much get strawberries any time of year, but you know, say 50 years ago, that might not have been the case. Strawberries are most commonly found right in the spring and the summer, really probably primarily more close to summer, in the warmer areas, and only for a shorter period of time. Now, people might look at the price and say, wow, it's so expensive in the winter. Well, it is expensive in the winter because those strawberries had to travel quite a ways because they were grown in a warm area that was not Colorado. And so the price goes up when they're less available. So that's something to consider. I show people when I do tours here in the store, you can find a lot of fresh vegetables on sale. And usually they're ones that are in season. So spot those out. Always kind of good to do scouting out and seeing different brands have different prices and different sales. And even in the produce section, you'll see lots of sales going on too. So that's what we mean by eating seasonally. And remember that if we're eating more seasonally, then ideally that food has had to travel less distance to get to us because it's closer to home. Okay, now we can also think about this from what kind of meals we normally would eat spring versus fall, say. So for instance, in the spring and the summer, we might eat cooler foods, more raw cleansing greens. And then in the fall and the winter, a lot of times we're wanting something more warm and hearty, kind of soups and casseroles, probably also utilizing a lot more root vegetables, which are hardier to grow longer in the fall and the winter. So those are some examples of that, eating seasonally, which can also be a good budget saving tip as well. Now, tip number 7, some people love, some people hate, but I will say it has lots of really great health benefits, and that is getting back to eating what we call fermented or cultured foods. Many cultures throughout history have their own fermented foods that they utilize depending on where the area is and depending on what food they have access to. Some examples would be sauerkraut, kimchi, yogurt, kefir, cottage cheese, miso, tempeh, and natto kinase, which actually all 3 are fermented soy products. Sourdough bread, kombucha, and water kefir. These are just a few of the examples of the different kinds of fermented foods that you can utilize. Now, I will say it is a budget saving tip to be able to ferment your own, but it takes time. So trying to get these guys back into your diet can be really beneficial for the digestive and the immune system. You want to be careful about yogurt and kefir because sometimes they can be high in sugar depending on if they have fruit in them. And usually what I recommend people to do is I recommend them to always read food labels, but look for the plain yogurt or the plain kefir, and then add your own fruits in there. And if you really need a little touch of honey or a little touch of maple syrup, which I'll be honest, I do sometimes. So adding your own things in there as opposed to buying it with, say, 20 grams of sugar in one serving. The labels that you want to look for on fermented or cultured foods is live or active probiotics or cultures. They may use either one of those terms. And the products on the right, you can see fermented, probiotic, 40 billion live probiotics. Those are the type of things you're looking for, which are primarily in the fridge. So that is where you're really going to be focused on. They are refrigerated. Okay, survival tip number 8. We want to implement foundational supplements. Now, why would we want to consider this, right? We're eating well. Maybe we have really good exercise routine. We're sleeping well. Everything is perfect. Okay, well, most of the time, not everything is perfect. So that would be one consideration. The other thing is that it's important to realize that we are bombarded with stressors, either lifestyle or environmental. Supplements are not intended to replace a healthy diet and lifestyle. They are intended to support, come alongside and support healthy systems in our body, along with a healthy diet and lifestyle. So that's first and foremost. We also need to remember that due to conventional agriculture and pesticide use and all of these different things, our food doesn't have the same level of nutrition that it did, say 50 years ago, unfortunately. And hopefully some of that is changing, because there are some people, some farmers who are trying to change the way they're doing things, which is putting nutrients back in. But unfortunately, we have to eat a lot more to get some of the same nutrients that we did 50 years ago. So this is where that supplements can come in and be of help, as creating kind of a foundational nutrition level. We also have to remember how far is our food traveling? When was it picked versus when did we eat it? And some foods lose some of their nutrition through cooking, some don't, some gain it through certain cooking. So all these different factors to consider. And stress is a huge one, I think, for all of us. And our body needs more nutrients the more stressed kind of lifestyle we live. So we have a basic supplement program here that's called the Foundational 5, and you see them listed below. We have actually since replaced lutein with vitamin D, even though lutein is also a really great nutrient. Great foundation with a variety of all the nutrients and minerals. Magnesium is a pretty important mineral that many people do not get enough of through food. It's important for over 300 enzymatic processes in the body, which is really important. It also supports attention and focus, bone health, cardio health, supporting healthy blood sugar, brain function, stress and mood support, and even supporting healthy levels of inflammation in the body. So it's got a lot of jobs, really important to consider that one. EPA, DHA actually are constituents in what we call omega-3s, which traditionally comes from fish oil. We do have algae forms, which are our vegan forms of omega-3s. These guys are healthy fats. They support brain health, heart health, joint health, inflammation modulation, supporting even prostate health, mental health, all kinds of things. Our super nutrient section is really based on what your health goals are. So there are so many wonderful nutrients out there that we just grouped them all in the super nutrients. And depending on what season you're in and what support you need, that's where you would go into the super nutrients for that. Survival tip number 9 is to strive for balance. Right now, we know we're all busy and our schedules are jam-packed. There's appointments here, there's appointments there, we're driving far, we're sitting a lot. I mean, we can all come up with a list of things. But if we want to start making changes and invest in our health and invest in slowing down so that we can actually just kind of breathe and enjoy life here, then we want to adopt simple changes, starting small, something that is going to be attainable and realistic, so that you're successful will then give you motivation to help you make more small changes. And all of those small changes are going to add up over time and create big changes. So I don't want to discourage anyone from starting small. That is really important. Always pay attention to how your body feels. Listen to your body. It will tell you, okay? You know, sometimes we try to push, but really sometimes we've really got to slow down, and it's really important. Even utilizing the 80-20 principle, right? Just because I'm here talking with you today does not mean that I don't like a cookie or a muffin or sweets or chocolate. But the idea behind this is, what do we do 80% of the time? Are we eating well, making good choices 80% of the time? Putting good things in for our health. So we're not striving for perfection here, but we're striving for just making a large enough change that it's going to impact us. And we all know this, that we want to lead by example, especially a note for parents. And you know, we can't tell our kids to eat vegetables and then we hate vegetables and we don't eat them. Probably not going to do that unless they just really enjoy them. So trying to you know, leading by example and what actions you follow, that's going to be really important. We do have this process on the right side of the screen here that you can do, which is called SMART goal setting. Basically what it means is, it means you make a specific goal. So a specific goal might be, I am going to reduce my intake of Starbucks from 5 times a week to 3 times a week. Measurable, you want to make it measurable. Are you really going to do it? Well, the measurable part would be, can I measure that I only went to Starbucks 3 times in a week as opposed to 5? Well, yes, I can probably check cash or I can check a bank card, right? So it's measurable. Attainable. Is it attainable right now that I will really actually only do 3 times a week? Is it relevant to, say, my budget? Is it relevant to my health goals? And then time-based. How long am I going to give myself to get down from 5 to 3? Am I going to give myself 2 weeks? Am I going to give myself a month? So that's kind of the process with that, if you would like to try to implement something like that and that is helpful for you. Survival tip number 10 is that we want to get active. Outdoors if at all possible. We want to get that natural vitamin D with us being outside in the sunshine, breathing hopefully some really good fresh air, we hope. And even a 20 to 30 minute walk every day, or even several times a week, is a great place to start. As you're building up your stamina and things that your time frame for exercising, if you enjoy it, you're more likely to do it. A little example of that is, I can't stand to go into a gym and just do weights or be on the treadmill. I don't like it, but I love kickboxing. So I have actually even found online videos for kickboxing, or there are even gyms that do just focus on kickboxing. So find something you like. Is it dance? Is it swimming? If you like it, you're more than likely going to stick with it. And the other thing is checking priorities. And the one note I'll say, I know we're all very busy, but we still know TV is a pretty big part in people's schedules. And probably never a bad idea to reduce that time and replace it with something a little more valuable that will really benefit you down the road. So just a thought on that. We have plenty of resources in our store. We have books, we have free customer literature files that talk on all kinds of subjects that will give you more information for you to make these decisions for you and your family. I actually have some documents that I have shared today, and I'm going to go over those really briefly so that you know what resources that you can download from today's presentation and that you can utilize as you're trying to decide how to budget your food, how to budget your time for making good food, and also how to build meals. So when we're making a meal plan, we want to be encouraging that we've kind of gone over eating real food, focusing on organic, making sure that we know how the animal was raised. But we have what's called a healthy meal wheel here, which is a great tool to help you build healthy meals. So when you're trying to think of, well, gosh, what am I going to put together? What do I have available? Utilizing this sheet is really helpful. So we really want half of our plate filled with vegetables, breakfast, lunch, and dinner if we can. That's a lot of vegetables, I know, and it's not always easy. Quality protein, about a palm size, a quality protein. And we know that now has to do with how they were raised and what they were fed. Healthy fats, really want to focus on those guys. They're really important for brain health, cardio health, supporting healthy blood sugar, things like butter, olive oil, ghee, even animal fats. Those can be really depending on the quality of the animal. And you'll see that fruit and carbs are really skinny slices on this pie here. And some people have a higher need for certain carbs, but we really want to focus on whole food carbs, things like root vegetables. If you can digest the grains and the legumes, by all means. But remember, we just want to be cautious there. And a lot of times people will swap their fruit servings with their vegetable servings. So we want to make sure we don't do that either. Fruit is a sweet treat. And there are oftentimes, if we're eating seasonally, not all of those guys were available back in the day all year round. So just being cautious in our usage of fruits. So you'll see here down below, we have lists of all different kinds of fruits and vegetables and examples of quality protein, even for vegetarians, in our foundational 5 here, which we already discussed. So this is a great tool for you to use. Just to go over to some budget basics, we've talked a lot about these items here, but remember that we're going to save money if we've already planned, because we're going in, we're actually building meals when we're shopping. We're not focused on the things that are not on our list, hopefully. And if you've done some homework, you might know the sales that are currently taking place, and you might have coupons. And that's going to be another great way to help save money, for you to make a list and figure out what meals you're going to make based on what's on sale or what you have at home. Starting with what you know. So if you have some favorite recipes that you need to dust off and put in your rotation, then that can be a great place to start. And when we're talking about planning meals, I'm going to switch over, if I can, to this guy. Nope, wrong one. So sorry, but anyway, we'll have a shopping list here. This shopping list, we have 2 options on this one, and you can utilize this in a few different ways. So option 2 would be very helpful for those of you who have make a list throughout the week as you're using things, and if you run out of something, you jot it down so you don't forget. The bummer is there's more than one person in the kitchen usually, so you've got to get all people on board to recording what is missing and that you need to buy, because otherwise there's nothing more frustrating than running out of something. You didn't know that you ran out of it, and then you missed it on the shopping trip. So you could make your list for the week, and then you could actually put that list into the option number 1 before you go to the store to have it categorically ready, so that you can zip through the store and you know exactly what you need from what section. So that's one option to use this. The other one is for those of you who automatically think categorically and you don't want to do it twice, then you'll use option 1 and you'll insert the items that you need accordingly. So this could be a really helpful tool. The meal planning one is the one that I wanted to go to real quick. This is 2 weeks worth of space for you to plan meals. My coworker is really excellent at meal planning, and I've actually been asking her tips for myself because I really struggle with this myself. And you'll notice that dinner is kind of the biggest section on here. And the reason that is because a lot of times when we make up dinners, we don't realize that those dinners can be used for breakfast and they can also be used for lunch. This helps us give us variety during breakfast instead of grabbing like a quick oatmeal or eggs every day, which I personally get really old. It gets old. I love eggs, but you want a little bit of flavor in it. So this is a great tool that you can use. You can even double some of your dinner recipes so that you have extra that you could then freeze and use the following week. But one tip that my coworker had for me and for you guys today is that trying to build up to about 2 weeks worth of recipes that you can then cycle through so that you don't get bored. And then maybe once a month, you swap one recipe out a month and have something new and put in a new recipe. But hang tight to these recipes. I'm learning that just bookmarking them on the internet is not always super helpful, but having them printed, you at least then have a drawer that you can go back to, and you have some recipes that you can go back to. Okay, much of the rest of this we've already talked about. One note I didn't have is we should never go shop while we're hungry, because we usually will not follow our list. And if we didn't make a list, then we're even in more trouble. So be sure that you've had a snack, maybe a protein bar or a beef jerky or something that you've had that keeps you on target with your budget and on target with your list that you made for the week. So you guys will have access to all of these. We've talked about much of it, but you can always go through it again as you're trying to incorporate these different tools into your schedule. So I want to thank you for joining me today to learn how to survive today's food jungle and some budgeting and meal planning tips. I want to invite you to my next in-store class. I am doing an in-store class here in Monument on Saturday, May 28th at 11 a.m. and it will be on foods that feed your brain. So brain health and what foods we can eat to support our brain health. I'd love to have you there. I do not need to RSVP prior. You just need to pop in, and that will be in our community room. I'd love to see you there. You can also ask any follow-up questions with any of this information as you start to mull it over and try to incorporate it. Again, I'm Kristy Grayson. I'm the health coach here at our Monument Natural Grocers location. I hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you next time.